In a dark room, dim light filtering through the blocked-up windows, Sharon Newman opened her eyes and listened to the alarm clock blaring from the loudspeaker. The steady, piercing sound seemed to pound on her head, waking her in a panic. Her body ached, her head was spinning, and for the first few seconds, she couldn't remember where she was. The room was cold and quiet, as if it had been abandoned for a long time. Sharon sat up, her eyes searching around, but there was nothing but 4 gray walls and a locked door. Bits and pieces of memory slowly came to her, but they weren't clear. She remembered a moment of despair, blurry images of a poisoning, and laughter somewhere in the darkness. But before she could think much more about it, another sense of dread set in. Phyllis Summers, the friend with whom she had a complicated relationship, was lying on the floor. Sharon didn't hesitate, immediately stood up and walked towards Phyllis. She used her hand to help her up. Phyllis slowly opened her eyes, her face bewildered, her eyes glancing at Sharon with a suspicious look. "What happened to us?" Phyllis said, her voice hoarse, her breathing ragged. "Sharon, what did you do to me?" Sharon was startled, took a step back, unable to believe what she had just heard. "No, Phyllis. I didn't do anything. I don't know where we are, nor why we are here." Phyllis, although weak, had a clear worry in her eyes. "Really?" she doubted, then wondered. "Is this the second phase of the game you have planned for my family?" Sharon was surprised, unable to understand Phyllis's question. She looked at Phyllis with a bewildered gaze. "Phyllis, I have nothing to do with this. I'm not behind any conspiracy. You can't think I would do something like this, right?" Both of them realized that something was wrong. Sharon feared that they were not only trapped in a deserted room, but also prey in a deadly game. Someone was watching them, controlling their every move in this room. Phyllis, still suspicious, thought back to what she had been through. "So what's the purpose of all this? Is it to get us to kill each other? Because it's obvious we're not friends." Phyllis's question made Sharon suddenly shiver. She couldn't shake the feeling that there was an invisible hand controlling everything. Was this part of a terrible game where everyone was a pawn and no one could trust anyone? As they tried to find a way out of this room, thoughts of betrayal and guilt gradually appear. Although they may not be friends, at least in this situation, they need to cooperate to survive. Otherwise, death will be obvious. The two of them search for a way out of the room together. The strange noises and strange signs around them make them even more confused. There are things lurking in the dark, and although Sharon and Phyllis may not trust each other, they both understand that in this situation, no one can face danger alone. What must they do to survive? Is there anyone else in this room besides them? And is this game really a challenge for them to kill each other, or simply a way for their enemies to test and prove their survival? Sharon and Phyllis do not have much time. Every second that passes is a lost opportunity. In those few moments, the tension between them continued to grow. Phyllis still couldn't fully trust Sharon, but she understood that they had to work together if they were to escape this place. Sharon closed her eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to think about what could happen next. Her mind was in chaos, but she knew one thing was clear: they would not let themselves fall into this deadly trap. They would find the truth and fight their way out of this place, even if it meant facing death. Because nothing could stop these two women, no matter what force was behind the darkness, no matter how much this game could push them to the brink of life and death. In the tense silence of the cell, Sharon Newman couldn't stop thinking about Ian and Jordan. Even though she believed that they were both dead after the recent events, part of her couldn't help but think about the possibility that some of their insane followers were acting on their behalf. Sharon sat on the floor, her eyes glazed over, trying to come up with any logical reason for what had happened. She couldn't understand why she was here, in a dark, closed room, with Phyllis, her friend with whom they had always had a fraught relationship. Phyllis, unable to sit still, was trying to use a paper clip to unlock the door. She had nothing but the faintest hope that the paper clip might be the key to their escape. But after a few minutes of trying, the paper clip got stuck in the lock and wouldn't work. Phyllis sighed, sitting on the floor in frustration. Every move she made was one of confusion and helplessness. "We're not getting out of here like this," she whispered, her face blank. Sharon, no less worried, still had a shred of reason in her head. She decided to search the small room for more clues. Turning to a nearby bookshelf, Sharon found a few books, all old and moldy, but something about them made her stop. These books had one thing in common: they were all the property of the Havenhurst Psychiatric Clinic. A chill ran down Sharon's spine as she realized that this place could be the Havenhurst Psychiatric Clinic, a place known for its strange and terrifying stories. It might have been abandoned long ago, but now, it was the place where she and Phyllis were being held. She wondered if Ian and Jordan, or their followers, had orchestrated all this as part of a revenge plot, or if it was just a dangerous game they were trapped in. "Phyllis," Sharon said, pulling her friend from her thoughts. "These books, they're from Havenhurst Psychiatric Clinic. I think we're in there." Phyllis raised her head, her eyes still filled with worry and undiminished anger. "We'll have to find a way out. Otherwise, we'll never know how much longer we'll be here." Sharon looked around, and her anxiety grew when she saw a bag of canned food and a can opener sitting next to the table. She couldn't help but wonder, did their captor intend to keep them captive forever? It felt like they were being held captive in a deadly experiment. Neither of them knew if they could escape, and if so, would they have enough time before they were in danger? The two women began to compare notes from before they were kidnapped. Sharon's vague memories of the wild dreams she had had led her to suspect that they had been drugged to create hallucinations. These strange dreams could have been the result of being drugged, and now they were faced with a reality they could not escape. "We won't be here forever," Sharon said, trying to reassure Phyllis. "Hopefully our children will find us." Phyllis turned away, feeling helpless and anxious. She had been through so much tragedy in her life, and now she found herself trapped in a situation she had no control over. But in that quiet moment, Phyllis couldn't help but feel angry as she thought about what Sharon had done in the past. "Sharon," Phyllis began, her voice filled with indignation, "what did you do to Heather? Do you think you can apologize for everything with just words?" Sharon looked at Phyllis, her face showing regret. "I'm sorry for everything that happened. I can't change the past, but I hope you understand that I didn't want this to happen." But Phyllis couldn't forgive easily. She couldn't forget what had happened to Heather, the girl she had loved like her own daughter. Phyllis's feelings of betrayal only made her angrier, and even if Sharon apologized, it still wouldn't ease the pain in Phyllis's heart. "Don't think that apologizing will make things better, Sharon," Phyllis replied coldly. "I don't want to hear your apologies. What you did, it can't be easily forgotten." Sharon was sad, but she understood that Phyllis needed time to get over this anger. Both women sat there, in an eerie silence, with anxious thoughts about the future. Their lives were in the hands of a mysterious enemy, and while they were still unable to escape, they had to face a painful truth: past events could not be easily erased, and bad decisions could haunt them forever. In the dark and stuffy space of the prison cell, Sharon Newman sat on the floor, her eyes filled with helplessness and tension. Every second that passed was a new challenge for her and Phyllis. They had been kidnapped, imprisoned in a mysterious place, and now faced with a life-or-death game that they had no idea about. A growing sense of dread rose in Sharon's heart as she realized that the people behind this crisis were none other than Ian and Jordan, the ones who had caused destruction in their lives. However, a part of Sharon could not deny that perhaps some of their crazy followers were still carrying out this plot. In a moment of silence, Phyllis Summers suddenly broke the silence as she tried to use a paper clip to unlock the door. She was determined, but after several minutes of futile attempts, the paper clip got stuck in the lock, unable to be opened. This failure only added to her helplessness. "Can't we get out of here?" Phyllis sighed, her voice filled with exhaustion and tension. Sharon didn't answer right away, but a feeling of extreme unease was rising in her heart. She looked around, hoping to find some clue that could help them escape from this place. Suddenly, a paper clip fell from Phyllis's hand, and Sharon saw a few old, dusty books on a small table. She quickly walked over and opened the books. In just a few seconds, Sharon realized something that made her panic: Havenhurst Psychiatric Clinic. All the books were the property of this place. A cold feeling spread through Sharon. She understood that this was the place where she and Phyllis were being held. This room was not only dim, but also had the gloomy atmosphere of a place that had not been visited for a long time. Something was wrong, and Sharon couldn't shake the feeling that everything was part of someone's sinister plan. "Phyllis," Sharon said, trying to control her panic. "I think we're in Havenhurst Psychiatric Clinic. These books, they belong here." Phyllis, still fiddling with the paper clip, didn't pay attention to Sharon's words. She was too tired and frustrated. "Do you think I care where we are?" Phyllis trailed off, but Sharon could see the panic starting to form in her eyes. Sharon continued, "We don't have time to wait. We need to find a way to get out of here and get out of here forever. I don't want to see you again." Anxiety and fear gradually took over both women. They knew their lives were in danger every second. And despite their history of conflict and resentment, they now have no choice but to work together to survive. However, in the midst of the tense moments, an alarm suddenly rings from the loudspeakers in the room, startling them both. The alarm sounds like a warning signal, but then something strange happens. A sad song begins to play from the speakers, haunting and dark. Phyllis frowns, frustration clear in her voice. "This song again," she hisses. "Why does it keep playing over and over again?" Sharon looks up at Phyllis, realizing that something about the song feels familiar. "Phyllis, does this song sound familiar to you? Maybe it's a message, part of the game we're being forced into." Phyllis no longer cares about Sharon's words. She was so tired and angry, but then, after a few seconds of thinking, she suddenly stood up, banging on the door. "Open the door. I will make you pay," Phyllis shouted, full of anger. But then, when the song stopped, a cold and disguised voice rang out from the loudspeaker system, startling both Sharon and Phyllis. "You're hearing everything, aren't you?" the voice said. "What you're hearing are the rules of the game. Remember, you can only survive if you cooperate. You have to work together." Both Sharon and Phyllis fell silent, surprised by the mysterious voice. A feeling of confusion and fear once again filled them. "Who is behind all this?" Sharon shouted, trying to find an answer. The voice didn't respond right away, but then continued, "You don't need to know who I am. What matters is what you do next. The only reward is survival." Sharon and Phyllis couldn't miss the last sentence. A surveillance camera suddenly appeared in the corner of the room, pointed at them, making them realize that their every move was being watched. There was someone watching them every minute, someone behind this deadly trap. Now, they are no longer just facing a game. This is a war not only with the enemy, but also with themselves. Sharon and Phyllis, unwillingly, must cooperate, not because they want to, but for their own survival. Everything becomes hazy, but Sharon and Phyllis know one thing clearly: they cannot stay here forever. And if they do not find a way to escape, their lives will be nothing more than puppets in someone's deadly game, a game that may end with their own deaths.